All right, gonna get this started here and make sure our audio levels are fine on the mic levels here, and it sounds like we are good. Okay, let people join up. The time is 8:14, Tuesday, July the 2nd. I'm Alan Holt to work at, put the chair down a little, work at KIII TV. This is the old school logo here. Been here for over a decade, about 12 years this June I've been here. So we'll talk a lot about Beryl. That's what the primary focus of this little live segment will be on. However you're watching it, from Facebook, YouTube, 3 News Plus, 3 News Now, on our app, wherever it is you're watching. We're going to talk a lot about Beryl. So it looks like we've got some pretty good viewership, over 1,000 people watching live. So we'll get started with this. And before we do get into it, I will try to be very meticulous about all of the thoughts, all of the reasoning, what I see. I'm not just going to jump around, and try to answer every single question as they come in. So we'll just do this whole thing, and then if I've missed something, I'll try to circle back, or if there's a really, a pertinent question, we'll try to get to those. But Beryl yesterday was a Category 5 hurricane. It's weakened a little bit, not by much. Today still has 150 mile per hour winds. Those are sustained values, so just below Category 5 strength, and it's got gusts up to 190. That's serious, big time, high-end hurricane. Just talking real strong, especially for early July. This is the strongest hurricane on record for the time. The second strongest, Emily, back in 2005. That one didn't gain Cat 5 status, though, till I think it's July the 17th. So Beryl is definitely the earliest, strongest hurricane on record. And it's moving quickly to the west-northwest, 22 miles per hour. As you're looking at this satellite imagery with me here, it's about 350 miles away from Kingston. It's going to be a close brush with Jamaica. And there may be a little bit of weakening between now and tomorrow when it does pass by Jamaica. The satellite imagery, it doesn't look quite as perfect as it did yesterday. You see the outflow coming off the top of the storm over Hispaniola. The eye is still pretty well defined. It's kind of shrinking right now. But on the western and northern parts of this storm, there is some shear. There's some wind shear that this Beryl is trying to navigate through, and it's going to be fighting this shear. So we should see some weakening. We've seen a little bit of it, but as it gets closer to where you see on the map, you see Kingston, Jamaica, where those greens are showing up, that's where we're expecting to see, some weakening of Beryl. The other thing that's happening, and I think this is really interesting to see, the colors aren't going to be super contrasty, but the Saharan dust. So you look, it kind of looks like a swirl of brown around the number 4, the icon there with Beryl. As wind is rushing into the storm, you see surrounding it, flanking it, both west and east, there's a lot of dust, and some dust is getting pulled into this storm, which is, right now in a really moisture-rich cocoon where it's currently at with the dust surrounding it. But it is pulling dust in, and that is somewhat of a mitigator with respect to development. So I think the shear is going to be the bigger determinant in terms of how this thing starts to weaken a little bit. And you see that the current forecast has it as a Category 3 hurricane over Jamaica. That's tomorrow. Then further weakening in the western Caribbean down to a Category 1 hurricane Thursday night, Friday morning as it hits the Yucatan Peninsula. And at that time, Friday, morning hours, it's going to cross the Yucatan Peninsula. And by Friday afternoon, after that land interaction, it should be continuing that weakening trend. Tropical storm status, still though 65 mile per hour winds coming off the Yucatan. And then that's when the forecast gets really muddy. It gets a lot murkier after Friday. And, current cone shows 2 days in the Gulf staying at tropical storm strength Friday afternoon to Sunday afternoon, and the cone does include all of South Texas, parts of the coastal bend. I've got our counties outlined there on the map. So not all of the KIII viewing area, but a good chunk of it. And, it's possible that there's a lot of uncertainty. First, the cone is over 500 miles north to south. Stretching south of Tampico, Mexico, and then north of Corpus Christi, up toward the Rockport area. So that's how wide we're looking in terms of the possible tracks that this could take. So the cone, you're supposed to see it, and more times than not, the center stays within that cone. But the farther out you go in time, obviously, the more uncertain the forecast gets, and with that widening of the cone at the very end, especially after Saturday, you see how much wider that cone becomes. The uncertainty is pretty high at that point. So right now, again, strong tropical storm into Mexico or South Texas Sunday afternoon is the current outlook. And I will also mention this. You see how that line on Sunday is not parallel to the coast. So if this thing moves more to the north, the landfall, when it moves in, would be later. So the farther north it goes, the later the landfall would be, which could push that out to Monday, depending on how far north or how quickly right or north this thing bends coming off of the Yucatan Peninsula. So what I did here is I kept the forecast cone on, and this is the tropical storm wind speed probability. So starting 39 miles per hour up to 73 miles per hour. And you see that the probability isn't terribly high into South Texas. You're talking 10, 20, 30% maybe. And that's at that 5-day range. So not terribly confident with respect to exact and precise numbers here. But you do see that the contours, the colors, they extend well away from the center of that storm, wherever it is going to be. So that's the tropical storm force wind speed probabilities, and that takes us again through Sunday afternoon. And this will be updated in the coming days. 5 days is a long time. It's a long range from the point of view of a forecast. We're typically not really confident in things outside of tropical stuff until about 2, maybe 3 days away. We're talking 5 days out with this. So there's going to be changes here. Some guidance is a lot stronger, others a little bit weaker. This is the hurricane wind speed probabilities now, and you see void in the Gulf of Mexico. So these wind speed probabilities are hundreds and hundreds of iterations of modeling from the National Hurricane Center. And you get these probabilities with those, that high volume of runs, all these different tweaks in the guidance, and it spits out these probabilities, and that's what we get, and that's what we show with respect to the wind speed probabilities. So hurricane force at this point looks to be reserved for the Caribbean, not as much on the Gulf side of things after that shear and the land interaction with the Yucatan between now and really Friday morning. So this one now, I kept the cone on. I took the times off of the cone because we've got the timestamp on the top right. And I also took the intensity off the cone. We're just looking at track here. So the forecast very congruent through Friday for track over the Yucatan Friday morning. And at this point, you see the high pressure is due north of where this storm's going to be. So that will suppress northward movement, through Friday morning. We're not going to see a north bend. It's going to stay going that west to northwest course through the rest really of this work week. And then over the weekend, that high moves off to the east, moves over toward Florida. And here we are Sunday, 6 p.m. Some of the modeling already in, others still out in the Gulf, primarily the guidance that is on the northern end of the forecast cone, which, those are the models, and you see how the Hurricane Center just kind of is right in the middle of all of the models with their cone. But there are really two camps of models at this point. The European is the green one on the bottom end, the southern envelope of the forecast cone, and that model has been super insistent about keeping this thing in check on that west to northwest continued path over the Yucatan, then straight through the southwestern Gulf as a tropical storm north of Tampico. I mean, it has been a couple of days now. We're running this thing 4 times a day and a couple of days worth of data, and it's all going there. So the European is in essence saying way farther south and a little bit weaker. And that should be the trend if it comes to pass that this thing does not take a north turn. It should be a weaker looking system, less time in the Gulf, probably about 48 hours in the Gulf, and staying south. That's one idea of what may happen. The other idea is a bend to the north, and that bend is certainly still way up in the air with respect to how much it turns north. But the GFS, for example, wants to bring a more developed system, more intense system, a little farther north toward, northern Mexico, Texas-Mexico border, or even South Texas. So that's what the GFS has been kind of alluding to over the last few days. And you've got all these other possibilities in between, and they're all possible at this point. We don't have a really congruent look on exactly where this is going to go, which is kind of expected at 5 days out. We're not going to have all of the answers 5 days away. There's a reason the forecast cone doesn't go out to 7 days or 10 days, right? It gets wider at 5 days, and then you narrow it down as you get closer in time to an event. So, I think the trend here and the takeaway is that could be looking at a tropical storm into Mexico, or something maybe a little bit stronger, bending more to the north and getting farther north in the Gulf of Mexico. But how far north, again, how strong, all of these things are not concrete. There's no way to know exactly what's going to be happening Saturday, Sunday of this weekend where it's Tuesday at 8:30 at night. We're not there yet. So keeping up with the forecast is going to be critical. This is a custom graphic here. I made this, make sure the mic's on here. Yeah. Made this to just try to communicate where the mindset should be in relation to this forecast cone. So, we do know that some of the guidance is stronger and farther north. We do know that other guidance is more to the south and weaker. So we've got all these things, all these possible scenarios at this point. And I think right now for South Texas, I don't want to go and step on anyone's toes that may be in the Houston markets or even, New Orleans. But for South Texas, I think being very alert to any changes, any big shifts in the cone, just being really alert to that and on top of it is going to be the best thing to do right now. Being alert to what your needs are in the event that you do need to do something if a forecast changes, and it looks a little more serious down the road. So being alert to the current forecast is, I think, the most reasonable mindset that people in South Texas, on the South Texas Gulf Coast, up to about the Middle Texas Gulf Coast, that's where you need to be. It's not time to be leaving town yet. It's not time to be boarding up yet. It's not time to be putting your plan into action yet. But you want to have the pieces in place so that if you do need to, you can without scrambling around. That's what preparation is all about. So that's how it should be really heading into an active season. You should be prepping before the imminent threat arrives. So I'm sure Houston's attentive to all of this. I'm sure, everybody's talking about this. But just being alert, being like, when maybe this is a bad analogy, but if you've got a dog, right? If something like someone's coming up to the door or some noise is happening and the dog's like kind of perked up, right? That's alert. You're alert. You're not really doing anything yet, but you're like, what was that? What was that, right? That's the alert phase. If the dog is attacking something or running after something, that's when you're in action mode. You're doing something about it. So we're at alert right now, given the current forecast up there. So this is a huge question that is asked all the time. When is it appropriate to board up? And there's a huge gray area here. Data shows that with wind speeds of 80 miles per hour, untreated, unprotected windows are going to be failing due to the wind force alone. You're going to have failure at that point. Just basic windows, right? That's when you want to board up. Basically, Category 1 force conditions. So right now, we're not expecting, anything more than maybe a low-end tropical storm with the current forecast the way it is in Corpus Christi and the coastal bend in our coastal areas. So there's a huge gray area between tropical storm and hurricane where if you got a 65 mile per hour tropical storm, the wind alone probably isn't going to damage windows, but debris can. Maybe a branch falls, it hits your window, and then you got a problem there. So there's a huge gray area. I think that the blanket statement should be Category 1. If you have unprotected, untreated windows where you don't have shutters or anything, it's just a pane of glass, that's when you need to board up, is Category 1. So we're not there yet. We are not anywhere close to that at this point in time. The thoughts that I've got right now are, like we just talked about, is, have your plan ready to go. For me, I've got a newborn baby at home. My windows aren't treated and I don't have storm shutters. So I've got to be thinking in my head, formula for the baby. What's my wife going to do? Where are they going to go if they need to leave? Are we going to stay? What about power? What about formula? All these different things, right, in my head that you've got to reason out in prelude to something possibly happening, but it's not time to put those plans into motion, right? I'm not boarding up right now. You know, we're not leaving tomorrow. It's just too uncertain at this point to be all in on any one scenario happening. We're just at that alert level of awareness. The timing, to me, if it's going to come this way, it would be Sunday or Monday, depending on that north turn. So the more north it goes, the longer it's going to be in the Gulf of Mexico. There's probably going to be little shifts to the forecast. I do know that the Hurricane Center, you know, they pride themselves on being very consistent from update to update to update with their cone. Those come out Central Time every 10-4, 10-4, 10-4, AM, PM, AM, PM, 10-4. There's some intermediate updates that'll come out at 1 and 7, but 10 o'clock AM, PM, and then 4 AM, PM, that's when those updates come out. And, you know, they're not going to be wildly different from one to the last, but subtle changes do take place in the lead up to storms moving into different locations. Regardless of the track this takes, there will be increased surf on area beaches. That's something that I do know will happen. And that's going to be whether this thing is a weak tropical storm toward Tampico or something stronger closer to home. You know, there's going to be increased surf on area beaches starting Saturday and then peaking Sunday into early Monday. You know, that's when I think the threat at the coast will be. So the wave heights, again, this is very rough estimate at this point because it's still 5 days out. But the point I wanted to make is that the swell period is going to increase on Saturday ahead of the wave heights, which means that if you're here for the weekend and, you know, you're going to leave before Sunday and you're going to get one last day at the beach Saturday, just know that that increase in swell period really can elevate the rip current concern. Even though the weather's great, you know, it's nice out, it's hot, no real threat Saturday, but the period on those waves coming in growing is going to elevate the rip current concern on Gulf-facing beaches. On Sunday, given the way this all moves in, that's when I expect to see the wave heights increase and those longer period swells still come in. So we're at 10 seconds, 5 to 7 feet Sunday, and then a little decrease in both the height and the wave period on Monday. But all of this time frame, there's going to be an elevated rip current risk. There may be some minor coastal flooding with higher than normal tides. And on top of that, there's a new moon over the weekend, or close, I don't know exactly when it is, but it's around the weekend. And that also has an increased gravitational effect on the tides, which alone can elevate them and cause minor coastal flooding. So that's where we're at with that, with the waves. We just implemented these new graphics here at KIII TV. It's our weather impact branding. So what we're going to start doing is we have a bunch of criteria listed out as to what makes, you know, a weather impact alert day, right? And one of those is elevated rip current concerns due to tropical systems in the area. And that's enough to warrant saying, hey, at this time, this weekend, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, we're going to be seeing elevated surf. So it's going to be, you know, more dangerous to be swimming in our waters. And that's what this alert right now would be for. And that's how it's going to look on the 7-day forecast. Kind of focused on Sunday, bookending it Saturday late, early Monday. The rain, we'll have a chance for rain. Rain I haven't gotten into yet because if the European verifies, we probably don't see much. If the GFS verifies, we see a lot more. So there's just a lot of uncertainty beyond Friday with the forecast in terms of what eventually happens with things like our wind forecast, the rain forecast, the surge forecast. All of that stuff is still up in the air until we get a good grasp on both the track and the intensity of what this storm is going to be doing. So I'm going to rewind here, just go back to the forecast cone, and I'll try to see if I can answer questions that are relevant to us in the area. And we'll just set it on the forecast cone. It looks like a hurricane watch just posted for the Yucatan Peninsula. So that's new just over the time that we've been looking at this, I believe. So I'll turn my attention to the comments, see if I can help or answer anybody. It's 8:39, about to be 8:40. Again, Tuesday, July 2nd. That's when we're on live on all these platforms right now. So a question about how fast the storm is moving. It's west-northwest 22, moving in the direction generally of Jamaica right now. Jamaica under hurricane warning. Category 4, 150 mile per hour winds. Again, the current forecast has this weakening as it crosses the Western Caribbean down to a Category 1 hurricane at the Yucatan, and the current forecast has it tropical storm. This is from the Hurricane Center through the Gulf of Mexico this weekend. So coming off the Yucatan Friday at 1 in the afternoon, moving into Mexico or South Texas sometime Sunday afternoon, about 48 hours, maybe more, depending on that north turn in the Gulf of Mexico. Yeah, water temperatures are still plenty warm. There's no issue with the water temperatures. We're in the mid to upper 80s in the Gulf. It's plenty warm in the Caribbean. So really, the shear weakening it prior to the Yucatan and then the land interaction in the Yucatan, those are going to be the features that weaken this. And then in the Gulf, again, the intensity forecast and the track forecast are both very low confidence right now. So, I wouldn't be watching this and seeing this forecast cone and telling myself, oh, I know exactly what it's going to be on Sunday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I don't have to pay attention to this anymore. It's not how it works, right? There will be adjustments. There will be tweaks to the intensity and the track in the coming days. But given the data that we have right now, this is the best and most reasonable outlook on what to expect over the next 5 days. Kevin, predicted wind speed and rainfall amount, in South Texas. I get it. We all want the concrete, finite details. There's no way to answer that right now. That's going to all hinge on exactly where it moves in. If it moves in on the southern side of this cone, really no impacts at all. It would be kind of like Alberto without the rain. It would just be coastal stuff, and it might not even amount to that much comparatively to Alberto. So, there's no way to predict with accuracy right now what the rain and wind numbers will end up being. Because there's so many variables. If it's the GFS, we're looking at a lot of rain. If it's the Euro, we're looking at none. And right now, what we've got is just a chance for rain, general rain in the forecast Sunday, Monday, but not ready to put totals on a map yet, given the low confidence. Okay, got a question about the high pressure over Florida and how that's going to be affecting the north turn. We talked about that. I'll show with the spaghetti plot here what that looks like. So there's the high over the southeastern U.S. It's going to be due north of Beryl by the time it gets over the Yucatan Friday morning. And it's this interaction with the high moving east that allows an avenue for a northward turn in the Gulf of Mexico over the weekend. How much it turns is highly questionable at this point. We talked about the trend here with the spaghetti plot. A storm that's farther south, like the European, the green line on that map is showing, probably going to end up being weaker than a storm that is moving more to the north, more time in the Gulf of Mexico. So that'll be the trend there. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up because I also have to go and keep things updated, you know, on my end with respect to the computers and whatnot, our website and everything else that I've got to do. But if you've got plans for the 4th of July, we'll wrap it up this way. You know, it's going to be hot, maybe a little Saharan dust coming back in. It does look like another plume just kind of eases in Thursday, Friday, Saturday out ahead of this system Beryl. Heat index 110, 4th looks just, it kind of just, you know, it's going to be a few degrees above the seasonal average, but I don't see any issue other than the elevated heat and the high heat index values. Friday, Saturday, kind of the same. And then Sunday, if we're going to start to see, you know, impacts, rain, wind, really increased surge, that's when all of that stuff will start to be unfolding. But again, there's very low confidence beyond Friday with respect to what this storm eventually does. So yes, I'm gonna log it off here, and we'll be updating these as frequently as possible. We do this thing, it's, you know, Rudy, Leslie, our producers, me, Chris, we all do this thing every single day at 5, 6, and 10, live on the news. Every day we just decide to get together and talk about what's going on in the coastal bend, talk about the weather, talk about sports. So you're invited to watch that if you'd like. Every single show is going to be updated, 5, 6, 10, new info, most current stuff. And then we do it again the next day, starting with first edition. Carly Smith, our morning meteorologist, excellent, you know, current information. John Thomas, Barbie, they're all there. Madeline Salinas out in the field. So we do it every day. We're always here for you. We're going to be here. So, you know, just keeping up with the forecast, keeping up with the latest. As you know, these tropical threats start to get a little closer to us, that's the best thing to do. Right now, nothing actionable, but encouraging everyone to stay very vigilant and aware of what's happening and stay in tune to how the forecast is shifting around. And you know, that's what I try to do and communicate every day, is how does this forecast play out with respect to us in the coastal bend. I'm focused on us, Corpus Christi, Rockport, Port Aransas, I am focused here. I'm not worried about, you know, other locations with respect to this job. My job is to serve this community where people can see KIII. So with that, I'm going to go get ready, stay up with the latest, and we'll continue with these updates.